Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Number 33. Alcindor against Reed.
Michael Jordan.
There's the alley-oop to Jordan. And Jordan is fouled by contact.
Kevin Durant.
Durant affect this game on the defensive end already.
Durant for 3 more.
Some of the biggest names ever. And do you know what they all have in common? Obviously, you've seen the title of the video. They were all unanimous college players of the year before making it big to the NBA. But then we get to the 2010s, where we have guys like Trey Bird,
5 seconds, fires for 3.
Frank Kaminsky, and Frank Mason III. What's going on here? How come they aren't dominating the league like some of the previous player of the years? Saying the award is all about talent nowadays feels like a cop-out, right? Why do some of them dominate college, grab all the awards, and then just like that, they're fighting to keep a spot on an NBA roster? Well, that's what I want to figure out today, by diving into each player of the year in the 2010s, to see what made them so special in college and how the skill didn't translate to the NBA, or in some cases, did translate. Starting off with a player many of us remember. Evan Turner wasn't a household name back in the 2000s, but in Chicago, he was making noise. He represented a new generation of players who were tall enough to play forward, but skilled enough to be a playmaker.
He could handle the ball, so we like, damn, this nigga 6'7" with handles. Like, he always had that right to left. Was coming in the game, we thought he was gonna be like the power forward, and he handling the rock, and the little white dudes are just running around shooting threes.
Yeah.
And him and Dimitri got the ball. We like, we ain't got nobody to guard him. Nah, he the cold one. Look how tall he is. And that's how we became fans. And then we was like, damn, I just kept up with him.
And from all the stuff that I read online, his teammates said that he was a great leader even in the early days of middle school. And before we start talking about Evan Turner, just one thing. If you're not aware of it, the NCAA doesn't give out just one award for the best player of the year. For college players, there are actually 6 different player of the year awards, as you can see here, all given out by different publications. At St. Joseph High School, Turner played both guard and forward. He wasn't an overhyped prospect. Instead, he let his game do the talking. The highlight? Going toe-to-toe with none other than Baggy Shorts D Rose. And you know that Baggy Shorts D Rose was a menace.
I think we're going in a half, and we're at the free throw line, and D Rose, they're up like 15. D Rose has like, I have like 6. D Rose probably has like 20. So he's at the line, and he's like, where you at? I'm like, what? It's like, where you at? You ain't shit, boy. So I go into halftime, we come back, long story short, I go at D Rose, I scored 25 straight, right? Like literally all, and mind you, this is a high school game, so I probably scored like 23, 25 straight in like a 16-minute spurt.
Yeah.
So we both end up with 30, D Rose has.
That's a performance that earns you rep back in high school. After that, Turner was considered to be the second best player coming out of Chicago. A distant second, because Rose was really one of the most talented players, like, ever. So that second spot meant something.
What's that like, though? Like, in high school, competing against D Rose?
He was D Rose back then, so I remember the first time I ever really seen him, we had like an 8th grade all-star game, and it was like west suburbs versus west side, south suburbs versus south side, and I think like north versus downstate. So I was playing on the west side team, so I was playing in a different game. But I remember like being in the back, and I see like a trophy, and it's like Player of the Year, Derrick Rose. I'm like, well, who the Player of the Year, Derrick Rose? Who the hell is Derrick Rose type stuff? Like, why would he get a whole trophy?
He earned an All-American honorable mention in 2007 and was a top 50 recruit nationally. That's big when you're in the same class as D Rose, Blake Griffin, beardless James Harden, and a backboard-breaking Kevin Love. With a 96 scouting grade, colleges like Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin were all after him, but he chose to roll with Ohio State. In his freshman year at Ohio State, Turner was averaging around 8.5 points and 4.5 rebounds, which was fine for a freshman, but he didn't make a lot of noise. In fact, I couldn't find a single interview from his freshman year. But he got better. His minutes went up, his role changed, and he led the Buckeyes in points, rebounds, assists, and steals. One of the only guys in the nation to do so for his team. The Bleacher Report even put him as the 12th best college player that season. He was slowly becoming the man, but he wasn't there just yet. But then, 2010 hit, and Turner went off, averaging nearly 21 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists per game. Not only did he lead his team in scoring, he led the entire Big Ten Conference. He was also second in assists and third in steals too, but he did have some problems. Early in the season, he took a nasty fall and broke bones in his spine. Thankfully, the injury looked and sounded worse than it actually was. And thankfully, he was expected to only be out for 8 weeks. But without him, Ohio State struggled. going 500 during his absence. And for my newer basketball fans, that means they won the same amount of games that they lost while Turner was out. Turner wasn't going to let an injury keep him down. He came back sooner than expected and led the Buckeyes to both the Big Ten regular season and conference championships. He swept the National Player of the Year awards, becoming the first Ohio State player since Gary Brad's in 1964 to win the John R. Wooden Award. He racked up 3,715 points from voters, beating out Kentucky's John Wall and Syracuse's Wesley Johnson. With college conquered, Turner decided to skip his senior year and enter the NBA draft.
To the fact where I think I'm forego my senior season and go to the NBA.
The Philadelphia 76ers picked him second overall in 2010, behind John Wall going first to the Wizards. Man, I love reading old YouTube comments just like this one on Draft Interview. One fan called him the next Reggie Miller, and another fan said that Turner and Rose were his favorite players. Not sure if he feels the same way in 2024. But not everyone thought he'd light up the NBA. Some analysts pointed out his struggles with perimeter shooting and that he averaged 4.4 turnovers per game in college. The NBA was shifting. Guys like Steph, Dame, and later Trey were changing the game with their deep shooting. Turner wasn't known for his range, and adapting wasn't easy. He played 10 years in the league, appearing in 705 games. He averaged nearly 10 points, 5 boards, and 4 assists. Not bad, but maybe not what you'd expect from a number 2 pick and college star. He became more of a role player, contributing off the bench.
The challenge then as an individual is how can I do those things in a team setting to help my team win a basketball game or help my team win a championship.
And I will say, when I embrace my role so much, I diminish my career.
Yeah. True story.
So when you're sitting here and we're talking about this, JJ, and I feel you missed your 16 years, like eventually you listen to the coach, it's like, keep buying in, keep buying. And before you knew it, I'm like, bro, I literally diminished myself to the point where I'm just like, what do you want me to do? Pass it here, cool. I'll set a screen, hey, big dog. I'll run the floor. I came in as a 6'7" point guard.
But hey, he earned over $98 million from NBA contracts, so that's a dub in my book. In his retirement, he has found himself working as an assistant coach for the Boston Celtics, and like many other players, as a podcaster. He has a pretty cool podcast called Point Forward, with his old friend and teammate Andre Iguodala. I really recommend watching the video where he describes how the two went from enemies on the team to basically best friends. In 2016, he was inducted into the Ohio State Hall of Fame.
Ladies and gentlemen, number 21, Evan Turner.
So what can this story teach us? Basically that being the man in high school and college doesn't guarantee superstardom in the NBA. Anyone you've ever seen on an NBA court at one time was the most talented dude in their town. But making it to the league takes more. It's not just about talent. I mean, sure, you can be incredibly athletic, tall, and be able to get in your bag. Sure, but it's also about fit, timing, and how the game's evolving. And remember, no matter how Turner feels his career turned out in the NBA, it's still an above average career. Some guys become college superstars and can't even survive a few years in the league. Speaking of, the College Player of the Year in 2011. You kids nowadays have your Caitlins, Angels, and Jujus, but back in my day, we had good old Jimmer. All jokes aside, Jimmer mania or Gym sanity was something you had to see to believe. I mean, you didn't have to like Jimmer or his game to know everything about him. Everyone from people at school to the guys at the barbershop to magazines and social media was talking about Jimmer. And speaking of him, that's actually not his real name. It's actually James Taft. But I think we'll just keep it as Jimmer for now. When KD's saying you're the best scorer in the world, and the president of the United States is low-key calling you his favorite player, you're a sensation. Sure, Jimmer Mania seemed like it was an overnight success, but it wasn't. It was years in the making.
Jimmer's first baskets were shot in his backyard in Glens Falls, New York, a long ways from Provo.
Before all the hype, Jimmer was actually a little chubby kid who looked up to his brother, who was a good player in his small hometown. Funny enough, he always had a feeling for the game.
When Jimmer was younger, Jimmer was a chunky kid. I'd say he was a little bigger than everybody else, but he could dribble the ball, he could always shoot.
I knew he was real competitive and that he was a good athlete from the time he was small. I mean, even 3 and 4 years old, he could do things that a lot of kids 3 and 4 years old could never do. And I watched him saying, boy, that's pretty good for a 3 or 4 year old.
Glen Falls wasn't exactly the epicenter of basketball fame, but Jimmer was racking up points for his high school team from his freshman season. As a senior, he averaged nearly 30 points a game and finished his high school career as one of the top scorers in New York State with 2,404 points. And get this, Jimmer was also killing it in baseball and football. He was an all-state in the latter. But when this basketball thing started feeling good, he decided to stick with it. Jimmer had talent, but college recruiters don't usually look at Glen Falls for the next big thing. So, unsurprisingly, he didn't have many college offers.
I felt it was the best for me to go out to BYU and play out there, and it's been an amazing experience.
He didn't have much of a choice but to accept the Brigham Young University offer. When he put their jersey on, things started to change real quick. At BYU, Jimmer was a beast. Over 4 seasons from 2007 to 2011, he turned into the main attraction for the Cougars. Well, actually for all NCAA basketball. The basketball world was just starting to fall in love with the three-pointer, and Jimmer had the right skills and was at the right stage at the right time. Steph had just showed the world what great shooting skills can do for your team, leading Davidson to the Elite 8 in 2008. Jimmer was taking some wild shots. Step backs, 28-foot jumpers, double clutch runners, crazy shots. And guess what? A lot of those shots went in. Not all of them, but a decent amount. He also had the green light of all green lights. Check this out. He took more than a third, around 38% of his team's shots. That was way more than any player in the country. Yeah, you had guys in the early days like Wilt and Kareem who took a majority of their team shots, but A, they were centers and took most of their shots relatively close to the rim, and B, they played ages ago, way before the three-point shot and modern style of playing. My point is, at the time, this was revolutionary, at least it seemed like it. Unlike Curry, who shared the ball and worked with his teammates, Jimmer was the lone star. He had to carry the team on his back, making him must-watch TV. It was like watching a solo artist perform. Amazing, but sometimes overwhelming. Jimmer brought an aura to the court. His performances in March Madness were something else. I mean, unforgettable moments that fans still talk about. His popularity was through the roof. There were tons of tutorial videos on how to create him in NBA 2K. And you know things are serious when the 2K mods are at play. And he was also putting up 2K numbers in real life. On March 11th, he broke BYU's career scoring record, previously held by Danny Ainge. His senior year was insane. 1,068 points, 52 points in a single game against New Mexico, and leading the entire NCAA with close to 29 points per game. By the end, he had 17 college records under his belt, 16 of which stand to this day. On an individual level, that's all great. However, Jimmer's game was all about him. He needed the ball to make things happen, which was cool in college, but a different beast in the NBA. With all that hype, Jimmer Fredette was picked 10th overall in the 2011 NBA draft by the Milwaukee Bucks. Expectations were sky high. A lot of people thought he was going to be the next Steph Curry, but reality hit hard. Jimmer couldn't quite make the jump from college to the NBA. He needed the ball in his hands to shine, but his shooting wasn't enough in the NBA's faster, more physical game. He lacked the size and athleticism to create his own shot consistently. And the NBA was moving towards guards who could shoot, but also defend and handle the pace. Think like a Steph Curry or a Mike Conley. Jimmer struggled with perimeter shooting and had a high turnover rate, averaging 4.4 turnovers per game in college. Bleacher Report expected him to possibly struggle, and they were pretty right on that. For example, we can see he struggled in the league just by showing his head-to-head matches with Steph. Jimmer played a total of 40 minutes in their first 4 matchups. He never recorded more than 15 points in their games, while Steph averaged nearly 19 points per game. We won't even compare their 2 career resumes because, come on. Jimmer bounced around in the NBA, playing parts of 6 seasons from 2011 to 2019, with teams like Sacramento, Chicago, New Orleans, New York, and Phoenix. However, by the mid-2010s, his NBA career was practically over. People gave up on him. He became one of the, hey, whatever happened to him guys. Even news publications were making fun of him. Vice called him the Steph Curry of the G League, a backhanded compliment if I've ever heard one. People had expected him to light up the NBA like he did in college, but it wasn't meant to be. But all hope wasn't lost for Jimmer. He found a whole new career overseas. Moving to China, Jimmer became a legend with the Shanghai Sharks, averaging around 37 points per game for 3 seasons. He won the 2017 CBA MVP, proving he could still dominate on the court. One game, he even dropped 70 points against the Sichuan Blue Whales. After spending some time in Europe and back in China, Jimmer made another surprising pivot in his career, transitioning into 3v3 basketball. Jimmer became an Olympian, representing our country in the Paris 2024 Olympics, where the team didn't perform super good, but they won a couple of medals before, so his 3v3 career is actually pretty solid. He kind of got memed during the Olympics for his injury treatment, but let's skip that. Today, Jimmer is still playing professionally and enjoying success overseas. His journey shows that not everyone is meant for the NBA, but that doesn't mean the end of a basketball career. Jimmer kind of found his niche. Not everyone is cut out for the NBA, even if they were amazing in college. Think Adam Morrison, who shot and competed like Larry Bird while in college, but in the pros, he was just a decent starter before injuries took him out. Jimmer is similar. Compare Jimmer to Evan Turner. Turner managed to carve out a decade-long NBA career by accepting his role as a role player, even if he wasn't the main guy. Some players can come to terms with not being the star and adapting their game to fit the team. Others, like Jimmer, keep trying to be the main attraction, which sometimes holds them back in the league that demands versatility and teamwork. Jimmer found his success in China and 3v3 because he embraced what he was good at without trying to force his college style into the NBA mold. But overall, Jimmer did more than fine. I personally think he carved out a pretty good career for himself. I'm fully aware that some people may find his career a little disappointing to say the least, and I'm sure there will be comments about it below, and some will be worse than others. So let's move on to a guy who lived up to all his expectations. Or most of them, at least. John Calipari is probably best known for his work with freshman point guards. The man did recruit 15 5-star point guards in his career, but perhaps his finest work came coaching a center to possibly the best freshman season in the 21st century. Anthony Davis's story starts earlier than most. We need to go back to the beginning of his high school journey to paint the full picture. As a freshman, AD was a talented player but still developing. Just another 6'3" guard putting up good numbers. While he might have dominated locally, players with similar profiles could be found in high schools all across America. Not a lot of scouts were chasing AD at the time. As a matter of fact, he only got a scholarship offer from Cleveland State. However, between his junior and senior years, a sudden growth spurt would change his destiny completely. Out of nowhere, Anthony Davis grew like crazy, from 6'3" to 6'5", then to 6'8", and by the time he finished high school, he was a towering 6'10". Just like that, he wasn't just another guard. He started playing power forward and got ranked number 2 in the ESPN 100 as a junior. 2010 was a crazy year for Davis. He was the co-MVP of the FIBA U17 World Championship in Germany, and back home, he was putting up, well, Wilt Chamberlain numbers basically. He was averaging 32 points, 22 rebounds, and 7 blocks per game. He crushed it in the Jordan Classic All-American game with 29 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 blocks. When you take all these performances in consideration, it's no surprise he became one of the top high school prospects of the 21st century. And his high school mixtape was kind of insane. Here's AD reacting to it years later.
So I remember that was the first time I ever dunked on someone right there in high school.
By 2011, Anthony Davis was the #1 prospect in the United States. Though he considered Ohio State and Syracuse, Davis decided to roll with Kentucky on November 10th, 2010. Playing for Kentucky in the 2012 season, he was a part of a team that went 38-2. As a freshman, he started all 40 games, leading the Wildcats with 14 points, 10 rebounds, and nearly 5 blocks per game. He also connected on over 63% of his shots from the field. Okay, if you're a stat hound, these numbers may not sound that impressive, but getting close to a triple-double off of blocks is kinda crazy. Keep in mind that AD was still a teenager during his freshman year, and just look at how he compares to some of the top centers in college history. You can argue that only Shaq's freshman year was more impressive, due to comparable numbers and the fact that he was only 17. Shaq was insane, but that's a story for another day. The stats and records are all good, but what wowed NBA teams and even casual basketball fans was Davis's style. His game was something else. He knew how to finish in the paint, and AD had a great arsenal of hooks and shots inside, and was athletic enough to dunk over multiple defenders. And his shooting skills were pretty interesting. I mean, they were good, especially for a big man, but they were still raw. Davis took a lot of wild shots, step backs, 28-foot jumpers, double clutch runners. He was everywhere on the court. But understanding of space and his ability to cut to the basket made him a standout in college. He converted more than 80% of his shots off cuts, which was huge since he didn't have a traditional post-up game. And remember how he played guard in his early high school days? The things he learned back in those days stayed with him. AD kept some key skills, like passing, dribbling, and shooting, that were crucial for his game. Then there was his defense. His height and length, coupled with a superb sense of timing, allowed him to deflect and direct swats to his teammates, instead of just sending them out of bounds. This combo let AD block shots almost anywhere on the floor without fouling, only averaging about 2 calls per game at Kentucky.
He applies a more measured force to the basketball during the process of blocking a shot. It may result in the ball being tipped to a teammate, which then may lead to a fast break down the court.
Scouts compared him to Kevin Garnett, although they added that AD didn't play with the same intensity. One scouting report I read said that AD would do good if he added some nastiness to his game. In the NCAA tournament, he averaged 14 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 blocks, and broke Kentucky's freshman record for blocks and rebounds, and tied the record for double-doubles. In the championship game, he won the Final Four Most Outstanding Player of the Year award with the fewest points ever. AD only contributed 6 out of 67 Kentucky points, but he did everything else. He was cleaning up the glass with 16 rebounds and guarded the paint with 5 blocks. In the end, AD won 5 out of 6 National Player of the Year awards, with NABC National Player of the Year honors going to, wait for it, Draymond Green. Yeah, I didn't even know Draymond was that good in college. And comment below if you were a Spartans fan during that time. Oh, and AD was also the 2012 SEC Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year, and Defensive Player of the Year, which as of 2024 is still the last defensive award he won. A travesty if you ask me. Considering all of this, you can say that Anthony Davis came in the draft with some high expectations. AD joined the New Orleans Hornets in 2012 as the first overall pick, making an immediate impact despite early injuries. Over 7 seasons, Davis consistently improved, becoming a cornerstone for the franchise. And throughout his Pelicans tenure, he led the team to multiple playoff appearances, averaging up to 28 points and 11 rebounds in the 2018 season, and finishing 3rd in the MVP race. But the franchise could never come up with anything resembling a championship squad. They tried acquiring Boogie Cousins and Rondo, but that didn't take them anywhere. So AD ended up teaming up with LeBron in LA, where he finally won. He became the first player in history with an NCAA title, Olympic medal, World Cup, and an NBA ring. So far, AD has had an amazing career, but individually, could he have done a bit better? Okay, when you look at all of his accomplishments, it's ludicrous to think he should have done anything more. But he was never the best player in the league like many predicted he would become. And he's now placed lower on the totem pole than Embiid, Giannis, and Jokic. The only ring he won is when he played Robin to LeBron's Batman. And even though he's technically the best player on the Lakers roster, Bron never really passed him the torch to become the leader, which is what the media expected would happen at a certain point. I just don't think this is fair. Fine, AD never became an MVP. He never took his team to the finals as the #1 option, but he didn't have to. Basketball careers take different paths. Some players have the luck to have perfect teammates surrounding them, allowing them to compete for years. AD found his groove by embracing his role and using his incredible talent to help his team win. He may not be the top player everyone expected, but don't forget, he's still one of the best in the game. Also, you have to appreciate that the small dude who was once your run-of-the-mill guard in high school became one of the best centers ever in college and the NBA. Speaking of undersized guards, we have Trey Burke. The first time I saw him play, I couldn't help but think of Allen Iverson. If you ever saw the man play, I'm sure you thought the same for at least a second. And it wasn't just the way he looked and moved on the court, it was the whole package. His height, the jersey number, the speed, and the grit. And you know, if you squint just a little bit, the resemblance is there. Now, I'm not saying anything revolutionary here. Trey did mold his game after AI. He said it himself.
Philly has been a team that I've been watching since I was little, obviously with Iverson. You know, my favorite player growing up. I think he was one of the guards that helped me mold my game. You see one of your favorite players do something, you want to run right outside and do the same things. He's been a big part of, you know, my growth in basketball.
Of course, AI was an inspiration for millions of kids around the world, and Burke was just one of them who, spoiler alert, was talented enough to make it to the NBA. However, the problem was, he came into the league with a similar skill set nearly 2 decades later than Iverson. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, let's get back to Burke's first basketball steps. Back home in Columbus, Ohio, Trey had basketball running in his blood, with his granddad and dad being local stars. Although he wasn't the tallest or most physically dominant player, little Trey was quick and agile, often beating defenders to the rim. Burke wasn't a top-tier recruit from the jump though. Ranked 104th in the country by 24/7 Sports, he wasn't exactly being chased by every big program. But by the time he wrapped up his senior year in high school, people were starting to pay attention, at least a little bit. A lot of publications didn't rank him in the top 100 players in the country. ESPN.com rated him the highest, which was 15th among guards in the country and 84th overall. They were also the only publication to give Burke 4 stars. His father, who coached him in the All-Ohio Red AAU program, told the Columbus Dispatch that despite his production on the court, a lot of recruiters failed to notice him. In the summers, all the 5-star recruits, all the McDonald's All-Americans, if he didn't outplay them, he played with them. But when the rankings came out, he never moved up. He reasoned that recruiters often try to keep all their players at similar spots. Basically, if other recruiters don't have a player in the top 100, they don't want to place the same player in the top 50 on their list. But all of this just motivated Trey to work even harder and keep on improving. In 2009, Burke got his first major offer from Penn State. Excited to play in the Big Ten and afraid no more offers would come, Trey committed to Penn right away. However, being unsure whether the coaching staff that recruited him would even be there when he arrived, Burke would rescind the commitment only a year later. On October 21st, 2010, he officially committed to Michigan State. At the end of 2011, he also picked up the Max Preps Player of the Year award, which got him some buzz. College pace and style proved to be just what Trey needed to show off his skills, because he was skilled and quick enough to get past most defenders in college. When Michigan needed a big shot, you knew who was taking it. And just like Iverson, Trey was more than just a scorer, he was a playmaker. In his freshman year, he led all Big Ten freshmen in scoring and assists. Not just that, but he led Michigan in points, assists, and steals, and even in total blocks, which you have to admit is pretty unbelievable for a guy that size. Burke's efforts helped lead Michigan to its first Big Ten Conference championship since 1986. He shared the 2012 Big Ten Freshman of the Year award with Jordan's main man, Cody Zeller. And after the season was done, he just continued training to prepare himself for the sophomore season. Burke mainly worked on his athleticism, reportedly improving his vertical by 4 inches. By his sophomore year, he had developed into the complete package, a triple threat guard who could shoot, drive, and create plays for his teammates. During Michigan's NCAA tournament run, Burke showed the world what he was made of. His performance against Kansas was the stuff of legends. The tournament is known for his upsets and Cinderella stories. But in this game, Michigan wasn't the underdog. Yet they were down by 14 points with just 5 minutes to go. It felt like their championship dreams were slipping away. Burke, who had been struggling for most of the game, flipped the switch when it mattered the most. He started hitting shot after shot, threes, twos, whatever Michigan needed. As the clock ticked down, Michigan chipped away at Kansas's lead, going from down 14 to within 3 points in the final seconds. And with just 10 seconds left, Burke calmly took the ball up the court. Everyone knew who would take the last shot. Pulled up from deep with the Kansas defender flying at him, and drained the three-pointer, sending the game into overtime.
Now, 5 seconds, fires for 3. The game is tied. He's tied it.
Burke's heroics continued into the extra period, leading Michigan to an incredible comeback and knocking off the tournament favorite. The team went to the national championship game, however, they ended up losing to Louisville. Even though Michigan didn't win the title, Trey's performance throughout the season and the tournament was enough for him to become a consensus player of the year. Unsurprisingly, Burke declared for the draft after that season.
I've decided to declare for the 2013 NBA draft and forego my last 2 seasons here at the University of Michigan.
After his freshman season, he was projected to be a second-round pick if he declared for the draft. This time around, he was projected to be a lottery pick. Minnesota drafted him 9th overall, but traded him to the Utah Jazz. He signed a maximum rookie contract and played 3 full seasons with the Jazz, averaging 12 points, 2 rebounds, and 2 assists. His most memorable moment in the league came in 2018 with the Knicks. In his second only start with the team, he had a 42-point, 12-assist game, which reminded people why he was called Baby Iverson in the first place.
Vernon Gomez stays with him nicely. Back out Burke, puts up a 3, knocks it. Burke gets inside, banks it.
But in the modern NBA, a 40-piece does not guarantee you a spot in the NBA roster. Just ask Kenny Lofton. But as much as Trey reminded people of Allen Iverson, the NBA in the 2010s wasn't built for players like him anymore. Burke's size was the major factor in his struggles. He wasn't tall enough or athletic enough to consistently create his own shots, and his defense was a liability, mainly due to his height and weight. He bounced around the league, spending time in the G League, and eventually finishing his NBA career with the Dallas Mavericks in 2022. Later in his career, Burke openly admitted that Michigan didn't prepare him for the NBA. He had all the skills, sure, but the physical demands of the league were something else entirely. Do you need height to be successful in the NBA? Look at guys like Muggsy Bogues, Spud Webb, and even more recent examples like Isaiah Thomas. No, it's not a mandate, but these guys are outliers. Not to mention that they found themselves in the right situation. Dominique's Atlanta team used to run the floor like crazy compared to other teams in the 1980s, and had great use of a small guard like Spud. Muggsy got selected by Charlotte in the expansion draft and didn't have any pressure to deliver right away, developing his playstyle slowly. And the Boston Celtics basically built their entire offense around IT. We have a video about it, and you can check it out after this one is done. I know this is kind of crazy to say out loud, but in basketball, height helps a whole lot. Just look at a guy like Manute Bol, RIP. Sure, he led the league in blocks multiple times, but he struggled to average 3 points per game during his career. Because he picked up basketball late in his life, he lacked conventional skill due to his height, and his frame was pretty weak. Sure, it was a different league back then. We don't have 7'5" guys roaming around the paint anymore. Well, actually, but anywho, all this to say, if you're extremely tall and lack skill, there's a better chance you'll play in the NBA compared to someone who lacks height and explosiveness. But ultimately, it's a combination of skill and physical gifts that dictate a player's career. Trey Burke was as skilled as anyone in the NBA, but his lack of height and explosiveness held him back in a league increasingly driven by both. In the end, Burke's style of play simply wasn't meant for the NBA in the 2010s. At some earlier point, sure, but in today's day and age, unfortunately, no. Personally, I like Burke's style of play. However, not all fans are open to this style, and some of the stuff they were saying was low-key hilarious. My favorite quote's gotta be this one from Reddit. Yes, Trey Burke does play like a 42-year-old Allen Iverson. Nothing more to be said after that, I guess. Now, this isn't a name that screams basketball star, but don't get it twisted. Doug McDermott was a stud in college. Doug is kind of the most quote-unquote classic player of the bunch we're talking about. What do I mean by that? He wasn't some freak athlete or someone who left after 1 year. Nah, he was a 4-year guy, your local college hero, and had a good high school career too. Oh, and spoiler alert, he spent more than a decade in the NBA without winning a ring. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. Let's start with what sets Doug McDermott apart. His relationship with his coach and his dad. Yeah, Doug McDermott's father, Greg McDermott, was his coach at Creighton, guiding him all the way to becoming the College Player of the Year. Talk about Father of the Year. But don't get too ahead here. That wasn't the only reason for Doug's success. Let's take it back for a second. Doug grew up in Ames, Iowa, where he played with none other than Harrison Barnes in high school. And that duo was no joke. They won 53 games straight and took home 2 state titles together. And Doug was right there, averaging 20 points and 8 boards in his senior year. He was the first team All-State, and when asked years later about his high school run, Doug called it the best time of my life.
It was crazy, man, because I was such an under the radar guy. You know, I didn't really develop till I was like a junior in high school anyway. So, you know, it was so much fun, man. Some of my favorite basketball memories, just going into those small, you know, high school Iowa arenas and having it sold out and people wanted to take selfies with us. We're just high school kids. It was really cool. We were rock stars there in Iowa. And
he was originally set to go to Northern Iowa, but when his dad took the head coaching job at Creighton, Doug joined him. I mean, it wasn't that hard recruiting your own son to the team you're coaching.
Yeah, how did you recruit Doug McDermott?
I sleep with his mom, so that gives me
there it is.
It gives me an outside chance.
And honestly, that was the best move of his career. He put the Blue Jays back on the basketball map, and before Doug, the program was known for creating Kyle Korver. You know, the guy who once got traded for a copy machine. From day one, Doug stepped up. As a freshman, he led the team with 15 points and 7 rebounds. Under his dad's guidance, Doug was more than a good scorer though. He became the face of Creighton basketball. And by his sophomore year, McDermott upped his game. 23 points and 8 rebounds on 60% shooting from the floor. Yeah, that's him dropping 44 on Bradley that year. As you can see, it's a lot of 3-point shooting, but there were solid cuts and attacks at the rim. McDermott was Creighton's main attraction, and the best part, he didn't even think about leaving for the NBA after his junior year. He stayed for his senior year to help Creighton transition into the Big East. Against tougher competition, Doug had his best season ever, leading the nation in scoring with 26.7 points per game. That year, he scored his first game winner against St. Joseph, put up a career-high 45 points against Providence, and passed the 3,000-point mark. He finished his college career with 3,150 points, Creighton's all-time leading scorer, and the consensus National Player of the Year. Now, after college, Doug didn't go on to become some superstar, and I don't think anyone expected that, including his dad. But he's carved out one solid NBA career. Drafted 11th by the Denver Nuggets in 2014, he was traded to the Chicago Bulls about an hour later. And though he never became an all-star, Doug has been a key shooter on every team he's been with. Over the years, he's played for the Bulls, the Thunder, the Knicks, the Mavs, the Pacers, the Spurs, and as of a few days ago or a few weeks ago, whenever this video comes out, the Kings. Which in 2024, this isn't a bad thing anymore. While he may not have the flashiest NBA resume, his shooting speaks for itself. He ranks 24th in NBA history with a 41% three-point shooting mark, 10th among active players. I mean, the dude can flat out shoot. Oh, and Creighton didn't forget about him either. In 2019, they inducted him into their Athletics Hall of Fame, retired his number 3 jersey, and gave him his own day. Not a bad legacy at all, right? Unfortunately, I'm not sure how much of a legacy our next guy will leave, but we'll see. Frank Kaminsky is an interesting case. He was put in the right position to succeed, and man did he. While Frank wasn't considered an all-time prospect coming out of high school, he did have one thing going for him. He kept improving every year. But let's back it up a bit. Kaminsky's high school career didn't exactly start off great. According to Frank himself, he was ready to transfer at one point because he was struggling both on the court and in class. It wasn't until he hit a huge 8-inch growth spurt that really turned things around. Suddenly, this kid who was about to quit basketball became the main guy. In his junior year, he was averaging a double-double, putting up 13 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 blocks per game. As a senior, his averages pretty much stayed the same: 14 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 blocks, leading his team to a ridiculous 29-1 record. He was racking up accolades left and right, getting named first-team All-State by the Chicago Sun-Times, and being recognized as one of the best players in Illinois. He was also the All-Area, All-Conference, and East Suburban Catholic Conference Player of the Year. Man, I should receive some award for saying all that in a single sentence out loud, but that's besides the point. All that was enough for ESPN to rank him as the 11th best player in the state, which isn't bad for a kid who almost gave it all up. In 2017, Bennett Academy would retire his number to commemorate all of his accomplishments. Now, Frank Kaminsky going to Wisconsin wasn't exactly a shocker. The Badgers had a reputation for developing skilled big men, and Frank fit that mold perfectly. What may be kind of surprising, well, it was for me anyway, is just how quiet his first 2 seasons were. He was barely playing 8 to 10 minutes a game, posting, let's just say, modest numbers. I mean, this is fine for a backup center in college, but by looking at this, you wouldn't think this guy was some National Player of the Year material. Then, literally out of nowhere, his junior year happened. Kaminsky exploded onto the national scene by dropping a school record 43 points on North Dakota. That game was a big "I'm here" moment for Frank, and he didn't slow down after that.
Moves it inside. Kaminsky catches at the left block. Now on the reverse, left to right. Block it. Off the rim, no. Kaminsky the rebound. He turns. Left shoulder turn. Up right hand. 2 more for Frank.
By his senior year, he was Wisconsin's go-to guy, and he led them on a rampage through both the Big Ten and NCAA tournaments. His style of play, while it wasn't revolutionary, it was pretty modern for a big man in the early 2010s. Frank could stretch the floor, shoot from deep, post up, and handle the ball like a guard. He was more than a traditional back-to-the-basket guy. He was the Badgers' everything, leading the team in points, rebounds, assists, and blocks. Frank was the guy they turned to when they needed a bucket, and he rarely disappointed. Okay, you guys remember that Karl Anthony Towns-led Kentucky team that went undefeated before the tournament and were clear #1 favorites to win it all? Well, yes, Frank and Wisconsin knocked them off in the Final Four, and Kaminsky was the main reason why. Even though Wisconsin fell short in the national title game, losing to Duke, no one was saying anything negative about Kaminsky's performance. For his efforts, Kaminsky was named the National Player of the Year, winning the Wooden, Naismith, and Oscar Robertson trophies. He beat out guys like Jahlil Okafor, Willie Cauley-Stein, which were 2 major talents who ended up going top 6 in the draft. He was actually the first player in Wisconsin's history to be selected as the National Player of the Year, and the second one to post 1,000 points, 500 boards, and 100 blocks. The fact that he was selected as a member of the Badgers All-Decade team in 2020 wasn't surprising at all. Yes, his college career was legendary, especially for the Wisconsin fans, but what happened to Frank in the NBA? Frank was picked 9th overall by the Charlotte Hornets in 2015, in what was considered a loaded draft. Expectations were high, but Frank's NBA career didn't quite hit the same height as his college days. He spent over 4 seasons with Charlotte, averaging a respectable 10 points and 4 rebounds, but he never became a star. Over the next few years, he bounced around the league, playing for Phoenix, Sacramento, Houston, and Atlanta, putting up 7 points and 3 rebounds a game. The issue? Frank wasn't the most athletic guy on the floor, and that hurt him. His lack of lateral speed and athleticism became glaring weaknesses in a league filled with fast, athletic bigs who could do it all. I mean, it's kind of funny in retrospect, but Frank once wrote in a blog during his college days that he feared he'd be the guy who bounced from team to team and end up in Europe. Well, when his basketball career is over, he may want to give fortune telling a try, because this is exactly what happened. In 2023, Frank took his talents to Europe, joining Partizan Belgrade in Serbia, where he averaged 9 points and a little over 3 rebounds. And yes, his lack of defense was a problem overseas too, and he caught some heat from the media and fans there too. But despite all of that, Frank still has a huge fan base in Wisconsin. The guy's a legend there, and they'll always have his back no matter where he's playing.
I tell people this all the time. They ask about Wisconsin. Actually, somebody just asked me this. It's like Wisconsin fans are crazy. Like, I still feel all the love from Wisconsin and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Buddy Hield entered the NBA at a time when the league was chasing something special. This was the era of Steph Curry dominating the NBA, literally transforming it into a shooter's paradise. And every team wanted their own Steph, because when one player redefines the game, teams scramble to replicate that success by finding archetypes of that player. We saw it in the 90s with Michael Jordan, when everyone and their mother was drafting athletic guards and a mid-range game. That's when we had guys like Harold Miner, Jerry Stackhouse, and Felipe Lopez. And then when Shaq came along and suddenly every team was chasing big, overpowering centers, we had heavyweights like Tractor Trailer, Eddie Curry, and Michael Sweetney. After Durant, every guy taller than 6'9" that could shoot saw his draft stock shoot up. Some of my favorite so-called KD clones were Michael Porter Jr. and Brandon Ingram. And now it was Steph's time. Curry had turned the NBA upside down, and teams were looking for the next deep shooter who could change the game the way he had. Enter Buddy Hield, who seemed like he would be the next in line. A sharpshooting guard with a lethal three-point shot? Yeah, the hype was real. But the thing about all these guys is they're all uniquely talented. Finding players that can replicate their success was nearly impossible. Born in the Bahamas, Shavano Rainer Hield got his nickname early in life. His mom's neighbor noticed his red skin as a baby and compared him to Bud Bundy from Married with Children. Since there was a local drug dealer named Bud, the family added DY to make it Buddy. And in 2010, he moved to Wichita, Kansas Sunrise Christian Academy. Though he was tall, he arrived skinny and had to shoot threes from his hip due to lack of strength. But while at Sunrise, he gained 40 extra pounds, his shot form got better, and he started draining more threes. He first started making waves as a senior, averaging 23 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, and helping his team win the National Association of Christian Athletes. While his high school career was good, he was still nothing more than a 3-star recruit. 24/7 Sports ranked him as the 113th best player in the nation. Rivals.com had him higher at 86, which is far from bad for someone playing at a small Christian high school. But still, nowhere near Curry level hype. This wasn't surprising considering that the Bahamas weren't exactly a basketball hotspot. In fact, before Buddy, only 2 guys coming out of Bahamas played in the NBA, Michael Thompson and Rick Fox. Also, the fact that he had to transfer from one country to another will come into play later. Buddy committed to Oklahoma, where his game really started to take shape. While some may have thought he was a great shooter, he was more than that. His scoring game looked pretty complete in college. Hield had that rare ability to create his own shot from anywhere on the court. Off the dribble, catch and shoot, pulling up from deep, you name it, and Buddy did it. His range was Steph-like, but what set him apart was his relentless energy. He never stopped moving without the ball, constantly finding the open space on the court.
In your career, you were known as kind of more of a catch and shoot guy and an energy guy, transition, defense. Seems like you've been playing a lot with the ball here, doing some really impressive stuff on the pick and roll and in one-on-one. How much have you worked on that?
I've been attacking it at least about 3 times a day, 2 times a day. You know, starting one guy. As soon as I get done with school, I went to Wichita, Kansas, worked out. Me and Tum from Michigan State. We worked out our old high school coaches, and Luke and Coach Brett, and Coach Kyle. And I came back to Oklahoma. We was attacking too, but I just want to get better. You know, that's something I was lacking, my ball handling skills. And I always in the gym, and certain stuff that's something I never worked on as much. And that's something I need to improve on. And I get after it, and it's showing off a little bit, but I still need to get better on my weaknesses, and I'm still working on it.
In his sophomore year, Hield adopted a more aggressive three-point shooting approach. His off-the-ball movement and quick release made him a nightmare for defenses. He knew how to come off screens, navigate tight spaces, and get his shot off under pressure. His basketball IQ was high, and he understood spacing better than most, making him an elite scorer at the college level. By his senior year, Hield averaged 25 points per game, shooting over 45% from 3, and led the nation in three-pointers made. His performance in big moments was another highlight of his game. He dropped 32 points in a win over Ben Simmons' LSU team, hit a game winner against Texas, and put on several scoring clinics during March Madness, with the most memorable coming against Kansas, where he dropped 46 points in an overtime classic. Even if someone breaks this record, the memory will live rent-free in the heads of Kansas fans and haunt them for ages. In this performance, the average fan could finally see that Hield was more than just a shooter. He was an athletic guard who could score from anywhere, even grab some offensive boards, and take over a game when needed, and that's what made him a college superstar. However, there was always that question: could Buddy Hield be the next transcendent guard that the NBA was looking for? Buddy was taken 6th overall by the New Orleans Pelicans in the 2016 draft. But the franchise didn't keep him around for long. Midway through his rookie season, he was shipped off to Sacramento in the DeMarcus Cousins trade. The trade came with some high expectation. Kings owner Vivek Ranadive reportedly thought Buddy had Steph Curry potential. He even wanted to build the team around him. Not everyone was wowed by this idea. However, for example, Colin Cowherd called this the stupidest thing he ever heard.
That the owner of the Sacramento Kings thinks Buddy Hield, who was great in the tournament, is the next Steph Curry, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
While Cowherd was overreacting in his usual manner, there's no denying the fact that the Kings owner was making a mistake. Buddy is a fantastic shooter, no doubt, but his potential wasn't that high. He spent 4 years in college developing his game, and he didn't have a lot of room to grow. Oh, and remember that whole transferring from one country to another? It turns out that due to some documents getting mixed up, Hield was actually a year older than initially thought. So he came into the NBA at 24 years old. Average athleticism with little to no room for development, and someone expected him to lead a franchise. Yeah, not the best idea. At the top of his game, he shot the ball great and averaged nearly 20 points. But his growth stopped soon after. In the years that followed, Buddy's numbers dipped, and he became more of a role player and a shooting specialist rather than a star. He spent 6 seasons in Sacramento before bouncing around to Indiana, Philadelphia, and ironically enough, Golden State, where he now plays alongside Steph. So why did Buddy never become a franchise cornerstone like many thought he would? Now, when you compare Buddy to someone like Trae Young, who came out of Oklahoma just a few years later, the difference becomes even clearer. Trae had the tools to step into the NBA and make an immediate impact. He was more versatile, he could score from deep, just like Buddy, but also had that elite playmaking ability. Trae's vision, his ball handling, his passing, all of it allowed him to control the pace of the game in a way Buddy never quite could. Their college coach, Lon Kruger, who had the unique opportunity to coach both, said Buddy was always the tireless worker, the guy who'd stay in the gym until the lights went out. But Trae had that natural instinct, the feel for the game that just can't be taught. In other words, Buddy had the mechanics, the shot, and the drive. But Trae had the next level court vision and playmaking ability that NBA teams love in today's guards. It wasn't that Buddy lacked skill, far from it. He just didn't have that all-around game that would allow him to become a star in the league, dominated by dynamic playmakers. With a career three-point percentage of over 40%, Buddy will probably have a spot on an NBA roster until his body totally gives up. I hear you. Enough of these hype players. It's time for another underdog story. And don't worry, I got you. Guys who make it to the NBA are often the best players on every court they step on before college or the league itself. Such was the case with Mason. He was a celebrity in Petersburg, averaging around 30 points a game as a senior in high school. He even had a close friendship with Trey Songz, who had attended the same high school a decade prior. Trey would often attend his high school games. Frank wasn't heavily recruited out of high school. Most scouting websites actually gave him only 3 stars. On 247sports.com, for example, Mason had a scouting grade of 79, which isn't bad, but it's nothing to write home about, especially if you want to play in the NBA someday. His best college offer didn't even come from a basketball program. Reportedly, an assistant coach from West Virginia who saw him play basketball thought he'd make a good cornerback and offered him a scholarship. Mason also failed a government class his senior year of high school, which made him ineligible to play in the NCAA, which forced him to spend a year at the Massanutten Military Academy. However, this is where he would get his big break. During a tournament in Las Vegas, a Kansas assistant coach, Curtis Townsend, accidentally saw Frank while scouting a completely different player. He was so impressed with Mason's play that he offered him a scholarship just a day after seeing him for the first time. Things were looking good by the time he finished his run at Petersburg High School. He'd score 1,900 points, second only to Moses Malone, and his team had made 2 state championship appearances. Frank also scored 50 points during the 804 All-Star Game at Benedict College Prep in 2011, showing he was more than ready to take on college. In October of 2012, Frank committed to Kansas University. Since Moses Malone, the only other standout from Pittsburgh High, skipped college altogether and went straight to the pros, Frank became the first player from his school to play D1 basketball. At Kansas, Frank turned himself into one of the top players in the country. He started slow, and as a freshman, he played on a stacked roster featuring Andrew Wiggins and Joel Embiid. He averaged 16 minutes on the floor and around 5.5 points. And he moved to the starting 5 the next year, increasing his averages to 12, 4, and 4. His junior year went similarly, with Frank still being the third option on the team. But 3 full years of work paid off in the end. By his senior year in 2017, he was the leader of the team, guiding the Jayhawks to a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Mason wasn't a big guy, just 5'11" in shoes, which means he's closer to 5'10" than 6 foot. However, he played bigger than his height. He was relentless when it came to finishing around the rim, shooting an impressive 49% from the field. But he wasn't an old school guard like Trey Burke was. At Kansas, he was a well-rounded player with a solid mid-range and an extremely accurate three-point shot. And as a matter of fact, Mason was hitting over 47% of his shots from beyond the arc in his senior year.
That meant a lot, because we've been playing 4 guards all year. It just shows you that, we can drive the ball downhill and create for each other, and we've been consistently knocking down threes, and I think it's just good for our team.
Mason averaged 21 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists per game in that season, becoming the first player in Big 12 history with that stat line, which earned him the Naismith College Player of the Year award. He beat out much more hype players like Lonzo Ball and Josh Hart for the award, who were all expected to be drafted high in the upcoming draft. In an interview with ESPN, Mason said, "It's kinda wild winning this award with Naismith's name on it, considering he was Kansas's first coach. Even with all those accolades, the Jayhawks couldn't make it past the Elite 8. getting eliminated by Oregon in the NCAA tournament. Overall, Mason had a standout college career. In over 4 years, he played 145 games, started in 113, and totaled 1,885 points, 499 rebounds, and 576 assists. Pretty impressive numbers for a guy who wasn't a top recruit. Now, that was the high point of our story, because as you might expect, things don't usually go great for most short guys in the NBA draft. You'd think a resume like what you're seeing here would help you become at least a potential lottery pick, but no. Frank Mason wasn't projected to be selected in the first round. So what went wrong here? While Mason's senior year resume was undeniably great, NBA scouts obviously can't look at someone's career on paper. Just like in the case of Jimmer and Trey Burke, his physical attributes left a lot to be desired. He was putting up numbers in the NCAA, but when you're an NBA team, you have to look at the bigger picture. Sure, Mason was hitting nearly 50% of his shots off the floor, but facing bigger and stronger competitors, his interior attacks were going to be useless. At the time of the draft, there was actually this great breakdown from NewYorkBasketballObserver.com, showing Mason at the draft combine, explaining how his weight could handicap him. Just check it here. While Mason had great instincts and enough speed to bypass defenders in the pick and roll, his pass was easily deflected due to his height. In the second video, we can see him messing up a pretty good open layup, because he was worried about the chase down from the defender behind him. Mason never played point guard until he got to Kansas, and he described himself more as a scoring guard. That worked in college, but in the NBA, where you need to be either a playmaker or big enough to play shooting guard, Mason was stuck in between. Also, his size would prevent him from being a top-notch defender at the NBA level. Worst yet, as his draft profile noted, Frank was 23 years old, so the chances of him developing his game far beyond what he had already were slim. Calling a 23-year-old too old is kinda crazy, but that's the NBA for you. Frank Mason was selected in the second round of the 2017 draft by the Sacramento Kings, and being selected by the Kings around that time wasn't always a blessing. He spent 4 seasons in the NBA, 2 with the Kings and 1 with the Bucks, and 1 with the Magic. He had some good moments, but he was never able to find a spot on a roster. He spent some time in the G League, earning the league MVP in 2020. Eventually, he went overseas to play professionally in Lebanon, Italy, and France. In 2024, he was playing for SLUC Nancy in France First League, where he averaged 15 points, 3 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. So, why didn't it work out for Mason in the NBA? It comes down to physical gifts and the league's demands. He didn't have the height or athleticism of other players, and while he was and is still highly skilled, it just wasn't enough at the highest level. Jalen Brunson's definitely a star, no question about it. Playing in New York helps, but still, he has earned his reputation. In hindsight, you could see that he had the tools, skills, and determination to become a really good NBA player. But he's just one of those players who at every level had to fight to prove his worth. That makes his story unique from all the other player of the years we've looked at so far. Before college, Brunson built his reputation in Chicago. He was the son of NBA veteran Rick Brunson, and the basketball pedigree showed. His dad just didn't give him the good genes he needed for the NBA. He had him run tons of drills and practice for hours while he was still in junior high. He would record him shooting and doing drills and play the tape for him later to show his mistakes and help him improve the next day. And it's fair to say that this method worked. At Stevenson High School, Jalen was an absolute force. The numbers he was putting up put his name on the map. He graduated high school as a 2-time Illinois Gatorade Player of the Year, Illinois' Mr. Basketball, and a McDonald's All-American. Yeah, personal awards are good and all, but this is basketball fandom. Did he win anything? Well, funny you should ask. He led Stevenson to a state championship, snatching 100 career wins on his way to it. For context, Derrick Rose and Jahlil Okafor didn't even crack that milestone. At the young age, Jalen had some international success as well. He helped Team USA win gold in the 2015 U19 World Championship, winning the tournament MVP award in the process. Keep in mind, that team was stacked with future NBA talent.
I mean, it feels amazing. It's so much hard work has been put into this. I can't thank my teammates and the coaching staff enough for putting me in this position. And we worked really hard, and I'm just really thankful.
With all that, it wasn't a surprise that he was recruited by big programs. He eventually chose Villanova over Illinois, signaling the start of what would become a golden era for the Wildcats. He played alongside future NBA players Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, and Dante DiVincenzo, and together they formed the backbone of those title-winning squads. The Villanova boys worked like a well-oiled machine. As a freshman, his biggest hurdle was learning how to be a role player. In high school, he was accustomed to dropping 50 pieces regularly, which, let me tell you, is a lot easier when you're the most talented player on your squad by far. But in college, he would have multiple talented players surrounding him, so the offense wouldn't just be built around him. As always, Jalen adapted quickly. In his freshman year, he started 39 out of 40 games, averaging around 10 points and 3 assists, and most impressively finished top 20 for the Bob Cousy Award. At the end of the season, he won his first NCAA championship by helping the Wildcats beat the Tar Heels in the finals 77-74. His role, minutes, and shots increased in his second season. Weirdly, his game, while improving, didn't change that much. Jay Wright, his head coach, told the media that Brunson had an old school game just like his dad, and he's approaching it like a 10-year pro. He also said, as a freshman, you can be talented, but not do those little things. He just does it like a vet. By the time he was a junior, Brunson had become the undisputed leader of the team. He was the go-to scorer for the team, the role that suited him the best. But since Villanova had so many great players around him, Brunson didn't even have to carry the team offense every night. Brunson was a good shooter, shooting 60% on twos and 40% on threes. However, what best suited him was bully ball, where he backed down small guards like guards do in the 90s. He finished his junior season in the 98th percentile in post-scoring efficiency, which isn't something modern guards do. In his last college year, he averaged 19 points, 4.5 assists per game, and was the de facto best college player in the country. He was actually the first consensus National Player of the Year in the long and storied history of the Wildcats, which actually isn't a small thing. While half the players on this list don't have an NCAA title to their name, Brunson got not only one,
not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, not seven,
but 2 championships. Oh, and if you didn't know, this here is a list of players that have 2 national championships and a Consensus Player of the Year award to their name. That's it. Some players like Corey Brewer have come close in the past, but no, not a bad company to be in, right? Brunson was great on and off the court too. Jalen got his degree a year and a half ahead of schedule, and he's actually one of the few players that year to have a degree before getting drafted. While that degree may help in the future, it wasn't something many scouts were looking at in terms of the draft. Scouts prefer younger, lengthier, and more athletic guards. Well, as this dude points out, the fact that Brunson looked like Prop Joe from The Wire didn't really help his draft stock. He was drafted 33rd overall in the second round by the Dallas Mavericks. Maybe Mark Cuban is a huge fan of The Wire, but who knows?
Once I got my name called, it was filled with emotion, filled with joy, and then I was ready to get back to work.
Yet again, despite performing way above expectation on the previous level, Brunson somehow didn't do enough to impress at the next level, which meant he had to put in more hard work. And remember, this was his resume before becoming an NBA player. He spent 4 seasons in Dallas, improving each season, helping the team make it to the Western Conference Finals. And that year, when Luka was out for a game against the Jazz, Jalen became only the 5th Maverick in history to have a 40-point game in the playoffs. It seemed like Brunson and Luka were set to lead the Mavs for years to come, but things didn't go as expected. Despite his growing importance to the team, Dallas offered Brunson a low-ball deal, and he ultimately decided to take his talent to the Knicks.
Did you have any idea Jalen Brunson would be this good?
Yeah, it was just amazing to play with that guy.
You get drafted with Luka. I wouldn't say the best draft ever. What you think about the draft class?
I would say if it's the best draft class ever, because that dude's a Hall of Famer. I'll say that.
As a side note, I love seeing hot takes from fans. Like here, we see that Brunson couldn't possibly be a number 2 on a championship winning team, and you wonder why he left. Yeah, just kidding, Mavs fans. That $104 million contract turned out to be a steal. Teaming up with some of his Villanova boys, Brunson thrived in New York, earning his first NBA All-Star selection and making the All-NBA team for the first time in 2024. In 2024, he signed a $156 million extension with the Knicks, solidifying his place as one of the league's premier point guards. Brunson has always been the type of player who rises to the occasion, and his success in New York proves that. Now, with Cat on board, the Knicks squad has some serious ambitions. If everything falls into place, we might see the first championship trophy in New York City after more than 50 years. And back at Villanova, his legacy is cemented. He was named Sporting College's Basketball Player of the Decade in 2019, and in 2023, the school retired his #1 jersey. Not bad for an old school undersized guard. Okay, we're probably like an hour or so into the video right now. Those of you who stuck around will want to stick to the end. Basically what I'm saying is I'm about to mix things up a little bit. Before we go in depth on Zion's career, I want to do a little deep dive on the history of basketball mixtapes. Why? Well, because Zion's mixtapes made him a star and possibly the most anticipated high school prospect since LeBron. And all of this came to be thanks to someone bringing a subpar camera to a high school basketball game. And it all basically starts with street ball. Back in the 1950s, a Harlem teacher named Holcomb L. Rucker had an idea. He started a basketball tournament to help impoverished youth from his neighborhood get off the streets. His goal was to motivate them to pursue college careers. The court where the tournament was first held would be known as the Rucker from that day forward, and it would become one of the most famous blacktops in the world. Every year during the summer, the annual Entertainers Basketball Classic is held where streetball legends and basketball superstars would come out to play. Everyone from Wilt and Kareem to Kobe and KD would play at Rucker Park. Of course, in the beginning, you had to be there to witness what was going on the court. People would love to know how good early streetball legends like Earl the Goat Manigault and Jumpin' Jackie Jackson were. Sadly, we have no footage of them. We can only see a glimpse of streetball culture through documentaries. If you're a basketball fan, you definitely know the famous footage of Dr. J playing in the Rucker. Well, filming that back in the 1970s required a full film crew. But in the 1980s, and the emergence of home video equipment, things started to change. People were bringing their camcorders everywhere, and people started recording their home games. On the other side of things, big studios like 20th Century Fox were distributing highlight VHS tapes of NBA players in action. You also had ESPN covering basketball on a daily basis, so you could finally watch as much basketball as you want. But these still focused on college and NBA athletes. Streetball wasn't shown on TV. Then, a single VHS tape changed the course of the way we watch basketball. In 1998, a young New York DJ, Set Free, was working for a new sportswear brand, and won, when he was called by a marketing executive to an office. He wanted to show Set a grainy VHS tape of Rafer Alston, also known as Skip to My Lou, with handles and passing that looked insane at the time. He decided to take the footage home and try to put music to it, mix it, and make an actual mixtape. In the end, when people saw it as a great opportunity to promote the brand, and they liked it so much that they decided to pay Set to go to the studio and mix it properly. He did, and they distributed some 50,000 tapes across America through basketball camps and record labels. The concept of a basketball mixtape was born, and one mixtape gave basketball a fresh, down-to-earth feel and made guys like Hot Sauce and The Professor stars. In the 2000s, And One was one of the hottest basketball brands around, and it influenced the next wave of creators. People were experimenting with formats, lengths, and distribution types. Then there was this thing called the internet, which was becoming popular at the time. In the beginning, there were sites like hoopstv.com where you could watch playground basketball videos. But when YouTube started to take off in the late 2000s, that's where we transitioned into the modern era of basketball mixtapes. In 2006, Ball is Life posted a video on their website of a really young Derrick Rose postering some kid. It became their first hit. In the words of Nils Wagner, the guy who filmed the dunk and co-founder of Hoops Mixtape, here's what happened. It was an event where Derrick Rose was there and I covered it. Before all this happened, Ball is Life had no traction, no views, and was just starting out. Get that video and it hit. I think like 20,000 views. The video was so popular, it crashed the Ball is Life website, because 20,000 views in a few hours was pretty unbelievable in 2006. Now, I won't say this video made Derrick Rose. He was already a fixture in the Chicago basketball scene and highly sought after recruit, but it helped boost his profile nationally. Kids from all over the US now knew who he was. By the end of the decade, mixtapes became common. They collected millions of views on YouTube and helped young players get lots of exposure. John Wall, Ben Simmons, Andrew Wiggins all got their first bit of notoriety through Hoops mixtapes. Even players who never got the chance to play in the NBA, Akil Carr, the Crime Stopper, got a chance to play for good money in Europe because of their high school mixtapes. By the mid-2010s, we had guys doing moves Kyrie never dreamed of. And shooting from range, even Steph would bench himself for. We thought we'd seen everything. But then there was Zion. All it took was a single mixtape from Elite Mixtape, and the 16-year-old Zion was already a star. I mean, just look at these highlights. He looked like a professional linebacker and he was still a teen. According to the Wall Street Journal and some physicists, attempting to draw a charge on Zion is similar to being hit head-on by a bus. Oh, and he also had a 40-inch vertical. Basically, when you factor in his size, Zion's athleticism didn't make any sense. He was an anomaly. Everyone from former All-Stars to NBA coaches were already referring to him as the next big thing. When Zion played against LaMelo in an Adidas-sponsored event in 2017, not only the police had to barricade the gym, and not only were Lonzo, Dame, and Wiggins in attendance, but the live stream of the game drew more than 80,000 people. And remember, these are high schoolers we're talking about. Now, there was more to Zion than highlights. The obvious comparison was Barkley. He was a relatively short player for his position. He was a 6'7" power forward, but he played way above his height. He was athletic enough to guard forwards and snatch rebounds over everyone on the court. Zion was Barkley, but for the new generation.
But I think Charles Barkley on steroids.
He also had a pretty solid jump shot for a high school kid. He needed work, but averaging 36 and 11 was pretty dang good. Needless to say, he was a 5-star recruit and one of the top ones in the country in 2018. ranked first or second by most publications.
I will be joining the Brotherhood of Duke University.
Duke actually had the 3 top recruits in the country commit to their program. With RJ Barrett, Cam Reddish, and Zion on board, Duke had possibly the best freshman team since the legendary Michigan Fab Five. Some even thought this Duke freshman class was better. While everyone was pretty sure Zion's freshman season would be his only season in college before the year even started, he made sure it was a memorable one. The guy had 54 dunks in his freshman season, and every time he did so, the Blue Devils' win probability would increase. So when Zion dunks, the team wins. And I guess that made Coach K's game plan a lot easier.
Everybody's talking about the money. How about giving him an opportunity to be the best basketball player he can be? If you're able to do that, you're gonna make more money than God.
That year, it basically looked like there was no other player that could win Player of the Year. I mean, Williamson was playing for arguably the best offense in college and was dropping nearly 1.2 points per possession, which anything above 1.0 is considered excellent at the college level. He was especially good in transition, where he averaged team best 1.5 points per possession. Oh, and he wasn't just scoring either. In Coach K's system, he showed off his great court vision, dishing out passes and playing perfectly within Duke's offense. On the other side of the court, he was dominant as well. Sure, there was his unbelievable blocks. I mean, he was a highlight machine after all, averaging nearly 2 steals and 2 blocks per game. But what made him truly special was that he only allowed 0.7 points per possession as the primary defender. Off the court, he was getting more popular by the day. Remember when he slipped and tore open his shoe, injuring himself in the process? Yeah, that little wardrobe malfunction cost Nike around $1.1 billion, with their stock dropping 1%. Zion bounced back from the injury just fine, and finished the season averaging nearly 23 and 9 with 2 blocks and 2 steals. Unsurprisingly, he was the consensus player of the year, sweeping all 6 awards pretty easily. Ironically, Duke's freshman stars were knocked out of the NCAA tournament by Michigan State before they could advance to the Final Four. Although Duke was heavily favored to win the national championship, it wasn't a huge stain on Zion's resume. In the 2 decades leading up to his Player of the Year season, only 48 players actually played in the Final Four, which you can see here. And when you look at our decade, yeah, 5 guys made it and 5 didn't. That stat checks out for this decade. At the end, Zion delivered one of the best freshman seasons in college history. He still holds the highest PER, player efficiency rating, of any player in NCAA history since Sports Reference began tracking it in 2010, along with the best box score plus minus ever recorded at plus 20.1. Nonetheless, in the last quarter of a century, it's arguable that only Melo, KD, AD, and maybe Michael Beasley had greater freshman years when it's all said and done. By the time the NBA draft rolled around, it was a no-brainer that Zion would be the #1 overall pick. But since entering the NBA, Zion's journey has been complicated. When he's been healthy, he's been every bit of the force people expected, putting up big numbers and showing that same power and explosiveness that defined his college career. But the problem is, Zion hasn't been healthy enough. The weight that made him such a dominant player has also led to reoccurring lower body injuries, and that's where his story starts to become uncertain. He's faced setbacks with injuries, and there's a growing concern about whether he can sustain a long career at the NBA level if he doesn't make adjustments. The weight isn't just about athleticism or fitness, it's about the longevity of his career. But there's hope though. Players like Joel Embiid, who struggled with early injuries, have come back stronger and achieved greatness. The question is whether Zion can follow that same path. In 2024, he took a step in the right direction, reportedly losing 25 pounds in the offseason after listening to advice from veterans like Charles Barkley. It's encouraging, but it's only part of the journey. Everyone wants to see Zion succeed, but there is a long road ahead. Whether he ends up as a cautionary tale or a story of perseverance, only time will tell. For now, all eyes are on him, waiting to see what happens next. When we look back at the college players of the year from the 2010s, it's interesting to note that 6 guards, 3 forwards, and just 1 center took home the award. What's more interesting is when we look at the guys who didn't stay in the NBA for long, we can see a clear pattern. Most of them were really high-skilled players who thrived on creating their own shots off the dribble, but they lacked the speed and quickness to do that at the NBA level. And then there are guys who seem too slow and not athletic enough to dominate in the NBA, but they're actually talented enough to do so. Case in point, Jalen Brunson. He's one of the biggest second-round steals in recent history, all because scouts didn't want to take a gamble with a shorter, non-super athletic guard. Funny enough, this happened to a very similar player, Isaiah Thomas. Teams overlooked him and took a 2-time All-Star at the 60th pick, even though people who knew him called him a winner. But what happened to him? Why was a 2-time All-Star struggling to find a spot in the league just a couple years later? The story is one for the books, and this video showing right here will tell you why Isaiah's peak didn't last as long as we thought it would.